Post started out doing events in Copenhagen, and a main point of making this new traveling festival series is to tap into different local creative scenes and sensibilities. So, what better way to open today's symposium than with the Oslo based art collective Tenthaus? The collective is itself a tangle of artistic outputs, currently encompassing both a project room and an exhibition space, a mobile studio, and a wide range of curatorial projects. They focus on local context, exploring collectivity and inclusion through different forms of engagement. As a collective, Tenthouse continuously reimagines themselves and what it means to be artists working with the public and what makes a relevant socially engaged practice. Today, they're represented by artist Jacky Jaan-Yuan Kuo and the artistic researcher Valentina Martinez. And together with them, we will muse over the question, how is the practice of the individual informed by participation in open co-creation, collective discussion, and community-led environments? So a big welcome to stage, Jacky and Valentina.
Hello, hello. Hi. Nice to meet you, and very nice to be invited to Tenthaus. And sitting here, I'm Jacky Kuo. I am a visual artist and a member of Tenthaus. Um, Originally, I'm from Taiwan, and I had my bachelor in graphic design before in Taiwan, and later on, I was here studying my master's in fine art. So I've been here in Oslo for 3 years and a half. And yeah, this is my colleague, Valentina.
Hello, my name is Valentina Martinez. I'm originally from Mexico, but I spent some time in the US and in France. And I came to Oslo, Norway. I came to Norway like 4 years ago. And I have a background in international relations and in artivism and cultural diplomacy. And I also have a dance practice here.
Yes. So yeah, I think today we're gonna we have like 22 members at Tenthaus, and we hope we can bring some energies from them and also share a little bit about what we have done in regards of artistic practice and also like local connection to the communities as well. So yeah, I will Um, I'll briefly introduce our like subject today because it's very interesting. Like we are invited as a collective in this context of a design festival and how in this context of self and how entangled self we are from all different backgrounds and yeah, entangling our individual practice into socially engaged art or community-oriented artistic practice. So yeah, would you like to introduce a little bit?
As you can see, we're internationally oriented a group of artists. We have one Norwegian in the group, and then representing, and then one with a Norwegian background.
Or two or three.
Two or two or three. And then other than that, we're come from different countries: Mexico, Taiwan. You said it. Huh?
Mexico,
Italy, Colombia,
Britain,
Iran. Yes, Britain,
Iran,
Belgium.
Yeah, and
Germany.
Yeah, Sweden,
Yes.
also Belgium. Yeah, you said that, Italy. Yeah. So we have a lot of different backgrounds, and yeah.
Two art historians, and the other ones are practitioners mainly and researchers.
Yes.
So what is Tenthaus? Tenthaus is is it okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tenthaus is an art collective and also a project space and also an exhibition space based in Oslo, a couple of blocks away from here. And it was created actually over 10 years ago in 2009. And then it continues to develop its practice around what contemporary art is and what it can be to different populations. So I think it develops over the curiosity of like how we can define contemporary art or redefine it together with other artists or other practitioners or other types of audiences. So it's a collective, it's not an institution per se. So that means that, is it okay? Like, is the sound okay? Yeah, where am I? Yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
just my lisp that I hear.
Or should I say?
Yeah, so it's a collective, meaning that it's like an horizontally organized group of artists that just join together. Um, so we just gather around this common goal, or more like a common curiosity around like what an engaged artistic practice is. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like an organism. Here you can see the gallery format of Tenthaus. Um, and it's a very mutable space, but we also use it as an office. So it can be, yeah, we have this space that we use for workshops or at times for exhibiting,
Wait.
at times for performing, at times for teaching, at times for working, at times for learning.
Yeah. Sorry, we don't
Sorry.
know how to navigate ourselves.
Yeah, we're like.
Maybe. Yeah, we will find it out.
And it started with three people, Eva, Helen, and Stefan, and they were offered. It started because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, we have two other Tenthaus members here uh, joining us. So I think it was like sort of a spontaneous thing. Eva is an artist, and I think she was offered a space in the school of her child, of her daughter at the time. And so she used the space for free, and she invited the two other artists to join in the space. And then after that, they developed a curiosity over how the artists can influence in schools, or like how the presence of an artist um, can, yeah, like what it means to have an artist at school, and like how it can engage differently with like kids, with the students. So after that, they developed different projects in other schools, namely Sofienberg Hersleb Skole, which is a school that is that receives people from immigrant backgrounds, um, and yeah, with other schools.
Yeah.
So now we're 22. So from the
Yeah,
three,
oh,
we're
sorry. Wait. Yeah.
we grew, we grew, and now the practice of Tenthaus expands schools, but then other places as well.
Yeah, so now we have several activities and for exhibitions and workshops and mobile studios, takeovers, dinners and performance and publications and conferences and radio tent house and some pop-ups. And we will also introduce a little bit later of like individual practices. So for example, this is one of the workshop we had in at Tent House. It's a workshop for kids like from Modogata School. It's a school very nearby, like 2 blocks away or one. And like 70% of the kids are from like non-Norwegian or more than Norwegian background. And then we see the need like to connect with our peripheral schools and then the kids, and in a way to bring them to our space to have I don't know, to expand more, like broaden understanding towards art, not necessarily in a very serious way or distant way. So we tend to, or like we often invite artists to direct or initiate different projects. And yeah, as you can see, they have used different simple materials to map out the spaces in the room and in a way to share their identities or comfortable zones to share and to talk about it, even though it's probably sometimes very difficult for verbal communication. So in a way, they can use a lot of body languages and yeah, lying around. It's already very different energy to the space itself. And also, apart from like younger generations or um, kids, we also now like trying to collaborate or to bring our energy to different other senior centers as well. So this is the space in Groenland Senior Center, also very nearby here. And we go there like for several workshops to react the space and by having different activities by easy means also to just like move around with our bodies or like playing songs and then navigate themselves also through the room and talk together. And we also have dinners, cooking, sharing, eating, drinking, and also have this guided tour from artist members from Tenthaus, like to introduce these students from Hashlab School. It's also a a school very nearby to to introduce a little bit about the exhibitions and then how they could relate to them in their like relevant means. And this is another mobile studio that Valentina has been like managing and also working for. It's mobile container where it's placed in different countries. No, in different cities. But we wish to, yeah, it could be nice to be in different countries as well.
Sometime soon. Coming
Yeah.
soon.
So it's also like temporary meeting points for students to, yeah, to have some different encounters with artists. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be like communicating all the time. But then they get to um, familiar with things are like happening, and then like bringing different energy to their like normal study environment, and also some outdoor workshops as well in also Groenland. Yes.
Yeah, so a little bit more about the collective organism, or the way we were sort of like we come together and we do these projects. Um, if So here we are very aware that we are foreign artists, the majority of us, and that means for us that we come from a totally different context. And also in Norway, it so happens that if you come from abroad, you are actually or this is my interpretation, of course. It's not like an advantageous thing that to come from abroad somehow. I feel like in my country, the country where I come from, if you come from abroad, you're like, oh, like you're exotic and interesting. Maybe whereas here, I don't know, maybe less, or maybe exotic and interesting, but maybe not employable. So it so happens.
Very true.
So it so happens that that we come from abroad, but we have this like desire to seek local connections, both because we don't have them necessarily, and because we want to become part of the context, and we're curious about the context, and we're curious about what we are and what we can become in the context. So it is very locally anchored because of need and because of curiosity. And yeah, so so within that, we facilitate like different types of exhibitions and dialogues and events and workshops, especially workshops. But I mean, workshop can be many things, and it can take many forms. So pop-ups are, for example, one of the formats where Tenthaus, the Tenthaus artist would be interested or be curious about a certain thing, would develop that in their practice, and then would be challenged by Tenthaus to bring it to schools or to different types of populations and audiences, and to either develop a workshop with them or explain, no, exhibit it with them, or yeah, sort of, or even build it with them. So Tenthaus, sorry, Jacky has an example of a pop-up that he's going to talk about in a little bit. It's called Sesiso.
Okay.
And yeah, so here, for example, like our most uh, immediate local connections have been with Møllergata Skole, Hersleb, with which with whom we've developed a long-standing collaboration with. So here you can see a photo of Stefan developing like this, like working with this
Drawings.
drawing in what was it like? You explained it to me
It's
earlier.
like I don't know. It's like analog pre-making, or like just making shapes and outlines out from these public heritages or like the monuments around them, and they normally don't really get into that, and it's just like a new exposure to them, and then see how they can be familiar or like unfamiliar with their surroundings.
Mm.
So that's one of the workshop.
The second photo is from a workshop that they did in connection to Et Werk, which is a work that is being exposed in the National Museum, in the new National Museum in Norway, and it's a collaboration with Helseskole also, where the students are also challenged to choose an artwork and talk about it and relate to it personally, and that's part of the project. This is a photo of Sissy Saw, which is Jacky's project that he's going to talk about later. But basically, it's a pop up, which is a temporary exhibition in Tenthaus, um, initiated
Oh, sorry.
by a Tenthaus member.
Mm.
Yeah. P1 Mobile Studio is another of our projects that I've had the honor and pleasure of working with and managing this year. It's a mobile studio for artists to come to schools and like temporarily be there. And temporarily can be from 1 month to 3 months. So we invite not ourselves, but other artists from our community to come, and maybe artists that haven't worked with schools or don't have any practice at all with teaching or with anything at all, to come and sort of camp out. Not camp out. They don't sleep there. They just have an office there at a school, at a skolegård, so at a schoolyard, for a couple of months. And the idea here, like Jackie said, is like to prompt these unplanned, spontaneous meetings between artists and students. So it's a little different to what a DecoS project would be. DecoS is this program. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but it's a program, a governmental program where artists come to schools and present a project to students. So as a dancer, for example, I would come there and perform my work in front of a school class or a couple of school classes. I actually don't know how it works with visual artists, but I know that that's how it works with dancers. And then so it's a lot of like touring, and then you go there and then you leave. You go there for one day, you do your show, and then you leave. Um, Whereas here, the mobile studio is there for a longer period of time. And then the artists can come and go and sort of work in their workshop. And it has like big windows. So the students can always come and are always welcome to like to see and then to talk and then to join. Sometimes there's planned workshops, sometimes it's an open studio. So the format is that exactly like what it would mean to students to like suddenly like see, oh, okay, there's an artist working here in my yard. What is he working on? Like who are they? Oh, maybe I can do the same. So it's that sort of like experience or like pop-up
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and also like this is another example that I briefly introduced. The Across the Universe Imagine Cartographies. It's actually the artist is also here, and then she was from Ecuador. And the fact that last year COVID was like hitting us like on and off in Norway, and there was the artist couldn't come to Oslo to actually carry out the whole series of workshops. So in a way, she was um, writing down and then sharing her ways of understanding towards the workshop by having instructions and then regular meetings with Tenthaus members. So the workshops were carried out by the artists from Tenthaus. So in a way, it's also very interesting to see how the the reality actually affects the close connection with like people to people and us to school and us to kids and us to the community. So at that time, it was challenging, but also interesting to see how this like there is always some like reinterpretation will happen like throughout these instructions and then online communications. So this is the one of the example of the workshops and how we connect our or like we adapt our like flexibilities through these different ways of working.
So from these projects, they sort of come and they somehow organically develop into further projects. From the Across the Universe project, now we're talking about a new development of it where we can expand it to different parts of the world. And this project is going to be called Unfolding the Universe. From the exposure, no, from like P1 being in Lier Commune for a couple of months. Now Lier Commune is interested in us being part of the new development of the new city that they're going to build in the future called Fjordbyen. So they invited us to be part of this research group that is going to develop this new kunstordning, like this new art art prompt, no, art commission for the new city, like early in the development of this city. So all of these things, we seek of ways in which we can continue developing these projects and get more anchored into the spaces and yeah, sort of make the practice more profound or deepen the practice more over time. And of course, it takes time, and of course, it doesn't always work, or it doesn't always need that. It need to be developed into other projects. But yeah, we sort of seek to really go into the depth of what the things that we engage into can be.
Mm. Yeah, so from there, like we have a lot of collective like collaborations or decisions and practices, but still we are like individuals, like we are 22 people, and then we all have our own interest in our own practices. And that's also how makes us like different and special. Like even though we have individual practices, but we still have this common goal to move forwards. And this is I'm gonna share some. This is a quote from a book Brené Brown wrote, and she's an American professor, writer, researcher, and she has this quote. It's called "Clarity is kindness," and this is very true to us and how we see ourselves working together, because sometimes you can get very like frustrated or like inconfident in whatever you do, and there's ups and downs, but always we are looking for this clarity and make us like transparent enough to share and then to debate, to discuss, to listen, and always like checking into each other. So yeah, that's also the structure or like the reason exerts that we have been like reminding ourselves also to each other. And also unlike like business as usual, and there's like probably some hierarchical ways of working. There's a leader, and then there are some like co-leaders, and then like a lot of followers on the bottom. And but in our ways of working, it's more like yeah, holacracy or like these kind of organizational ways of thinking. Its power is distributed, and the power means um, not also like decisional, but also like what was the
Economically.
economically. So we were trying to, yeah, because like in this way, whatever we work or which project we are responsible for, we all have the same like hour rate. So this is also the way how we see each other's or like respect each other's time, and then whoever has more ability, they can devote, and then they can come and lead, and then if there's something that the one doesn't feel like leading, it's always possible and open for the other members to take on or take over. So I think this is very much like distributed or like non-hierarchical ways of working that's very much like caring and loving in a way. And because of this quality, so we tend to be like even more bonded. So yeah, this is one of the example that we had in Bergen. Would you like to share a little bit?
But yeah, we were invited to make a discoursive dinner or a playful dinner, and here we had like different activities and get to know sort of prompts for the guests. Um, so here, yeah, I think yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say about this, but
No, it's
but either way, yeah, sort of the distribution of power
mm,
really goes into this sensitivity of what each person can give, of course, and it sounds really like common sense, but um, it really matters to us that that it comes from something that people really want instead of something people feel like obliged to do, and that's where clarity as kindness comes in, that we try to maintain as much transparency and honesty with each other and not like do things because we have to, in a way. And within that we are sort of developing like some sort of a sixth sense from each other, like trying to sense what each other can actually do or not, because there are a lot of like cultural differences between us. So maybe some of us would be uncomfortable with something and they wouldn't say it, or like it wouldn't be like their norm to say it, but sort of, yeah, we're learning to read the codes between us. And this is all part of a very entangled way of dealing with the professional and the personal, because in Tenthaus it actually happens to be very, very intertwined, um, whether we want it or not, because we are here and like we sort of come with Norway with our bags and like our sort of like our everything, so it has to be very personal.
yeah. And also from here, like individuals' interests can be like carry out. Like for example, your background as dancer, and then how you were like leading this like discursive dinner through the body movements, and then the other one has like more like verbal like specialty, and then the one can lead a part of that.
Hmm. Yeah. So I how we involve ourselves individually here. So I I choose to, or like maybe sometimes the group also assigns some of the things that would be interesting for me to do. So like for example, research based things, performative activities, um, and anything. I'm very interested in performativity and relational activities, and then time specific things, or like very much time, anything that requires like being on the site and very time, where the material is time. So so in Tenthaus, uh, the projects that are related to that, like mm, I choose to be part of those projects with other people that are also interested in that. And so yeah, that's sort of like my personal way of inserting myself and sort of my wants, because I also want to develop me as an individual. I also want to develop professionally. And so when we come to Tenthouse, we sort of come with our like desires of what we want to be when we grow up, or when we grow out of Tenthouse or whatever. And we sort of do them experimentally within Tenthouse, and with the hopes of getting attention from other potential employers. Yeah, that's an image from uh, uh, a residency that I did at P1 before I was in Tenthouse. So hmm.
Yeah, and also like yeah, my background is graphic design and also fine art, and now I'm more working in the field of installation and site-specific practices. So the way how I like see myself like individually in the collective is also to bring up these urges of understanding or questions that I would like to explore. So for example, this one is the workshop-based exhibition that I was collaborating with another member of Tenthaus, Wei Ting, and she's a composer and musician, and we both are from Taiwan, and we know like language can be sometimes a big barrier for mutual understanding. So the way how we want is to create like to make the exhibition as like a safe zone or like safe space to invite different like school students and how they could use their toys or found objects or ready-made and also the instruments that we prepared. So in that exhibition, for 3 weeks, we invited different kids, and they will have different games, and then without like using languages most of the time, and they will use like the instruments, making sounds, and also see themselves, their bodies as the sounding part, because um, most of them are also from like different backgrounds, and then sometimes they don't even know what to express, or the expression can be like very frustrated or oppressed at some point. So the way how we did is to throughout these workshops, and then we recorded the sound, and then we put the sound into the hidden speakers. The speakers are like underneath the wooden structures throughout 3 exhibition halls. And so in a way, after the finish of the workshops, the parents of them and also they could come back as like active participant, but also active audience, because that they knew they had a lot of special moments over there, and then sharing, and then they knew it's a safe space, even though it's temporary for a month, but then it's also a trust building up in between them and in between us. And I think that's also somewhere we like as individual artists, me and Wei Ting, we also carry out our own interest in like, for example, me making installations and planning the like spatial connotation, and Wei Ting like editing the sound and then putting things together, and then like the configuration of speakers in the room is also like the understanding of the room in a way. So we are also like trying to integrate our interest into yeah some events in Tenthouse. And also, yeah, just another add-on. It's from this exhibition. It's also the first tryout because I joined Tenthouse like last year, and also combining my interest in like installation making and also graphic design. I also, or like we also have this aim to have these publishing practices, and publishing in a broader sense is to yeah literally communicate without necessarily like having distributed printed matter, but also seeing this like sound, body language, like more than verbal languages can be a way of um, yeah message delivering, and also how yeah how sensation of the space or like memory can be a part or like another kind of alternative knowledge. And I think that's also a very um, um, important vision that we see our publishing practices. And from that, we also have the second like ongoing publishing practices. It's called Unfolding the Universe. And it was kind of like evolved from the previous workshop that I introduced earlier. It was the Across the Universe. And it was the interesting part to see how the like instructions from the initiative artists to the artists here in Oslo to carry out the whole workshops as a way to communicate, and then we see it as a potential like development. So that's also very interesting. Like different projects and Tenthaus, they somehow often or sometimes like correlate to each other, and also like taking the previous tryout to the next project, and then the next project becomes the next project, and they're all having these like common threads running around. And so because of this quality of um, instruction, we want to now initiate another project called, yeah, Unfolding the Universe. So the way how we do it now is like, now we have a bunch of people in, or like artists invited writer in Oslo, and then we want to for example, the current artist proposed an idea of like breathing as an exercise, or breathing as a publishing, and the way how the fact the COVID was here, like still on, and then a lot of people can breathe, and then it's a very sad fact, but we want to use this as our starting point, and then try to brainstorm and then collect different ideas as some results. And then it doesn't have to be printed matter; it could be like sound, it could be like short video clips and videoing the like body movements of breathing and so on, and packing everything whatever we have or like we discuss as a process or like an exercise, and then we send it like or transmit to the next country, for example Taipei, and the artists there, or like the artists that have been collaborated with us from before, they will receive this like amount of process, and then they will reinterpret and reprocess this result, whatever they receive, and then they would generate something new and then like transmit to the next country. So it's now also like an ambition. We are seeing ourselves to also, yeah, carrying out like different practices from before. And yeah, another example is like Wei-Ting, the musician, like she has her interest in making sound and also composing. She's now like the responsible for Radio Tenthaus. It's a platform that broadcasted every Tuesday from 8 to 11, both on the internet and also on local FM channel. And yeah, she will also again like combine her interests and like ways of working to the collective ways of thinking. So she will sometimes program different interviews and different sessions or different parts of music history into the programs, and to make it as a platform to invite even more people. So that's also how different interests of us can bring even more different like fields of thinking.
And if any of you finds interest in being part of Radio Tenthaus, then we'd be
Yes,
happy to receive
and waiting
requests
is
for you
so
to
nice.
join it, because it's open to anyone who has the interest and curiosity to say something.
Yeah, exactly. Also, okay.
Lately, we've been asked to do two very exciting projects of curating the Taine Triennale and curating the Art Biennale in Moss for next year. So these are very interesting, and they're going to be very interesting developments for our collective, because we're going to have to find ways to work better, or not work better, but work effectively. Um, as a group. So it's it's going to be a learning process, and maybe if we come again to another talk, we will tell you about it, about how it went. um, so if you click for the
Yes.
next one, yeah. So curating, we're seeing curating as a way of course, taking care and like referring ourselves very much to the place. So we want to be anchored very much in Moss, and we want to be there present, and we want to be relevant to the people there. So that means that we really have to like ingrain ourselves, or like really immerse ourselves into Moss, and maybe have a different curatorial practice than what the previous curators have done before in Moss. So yeah, so that's sort of like our wish, and within that we are working with different structures, different ways of logistically make that happen,
In
with our
bubbles. In
in bubbles.
bubbles.
Yeah, so we have I see only women in the photo, but we do have men in the group.
No, it's
Uh, oh yes, yes, Kik is there, and of course you're here, and we have Stefan. Yeah. Anyway, so and Stan, but yeah, we have bubbles depending on what our interests are. So Jackie is in the publication bubble. I'm in the research bubble, and yeah, we report to each other every week.
yeah, and also it's also interesting to see how these bunch of us like co-curate on something like that's very big upcoming, and then the way how we divide into bubbles is not to divide like opinions or discussions, but more like because we trust in someone who has more ability or more availability towards something. For example, like waiting, she's very interested in sound and in the way how she had carried out Radio Tenthaus. It's been such a wonderful journey. So she is, of course, in bubble, but she can always like invite the other of us to join the bubble, and then these bubbles are overlap to each other, but also because of the individual interests, so we are fully in trust of each other. So again, like I don't think there's a hierarchy ways of thinking around discussions, and um, yeah, so that's also like our current like big text coming up.
So I guess to round our talk, we did sense that there are these key words around Tenthaus and our involvement with Tenthaus. So these are sort of like the words that ring to us very true and that have a lot of meaning in what we do in our everyday as part of Tenthaus. Um, how much time do we have left? Or what's the time now? Sorry, I don't have a watch with me.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go very much into detail with each word, but because we did mention it that we sort of joined out of necessity in a way, but necessity can take a different shape for each person, individually. So like maybe for the Norwegian in the group, like it wasn't adaptation or assimilation to Norway. It was maybe the artistic practice, like a way to enhance the artistic practice in a different way. So we do question ourselves around all of these words, like what is an engaged practice, and uh, what does it mean to me that my practice is engaging, or how can I make my practice engaging? How can I engage with people, and is it engaging for everybody I work with, or is it engaging for some? And how can and why? Like all of these like questions that is very important to keep burning and to keep uh, that they're alive and that they're still there. Um, so same with the meaning of socially engaged practice. That is also a very fluctuating word. What is it? What is it for the context in Norway? Socially engaged practice has a totally different look in, let's say, in North America or in Taiwan or in so what does it mean for me coming outside of Norway to engage into a socially engaged practice in a context, in this city, which is probably different than in other cities in Norway. So yeah, so these sort of like nuances within translation of ourselves, of our communication, because we do realize that we speak a second language to each other. Look, so I speak to Jackie in what would be my second language,
Or
and then
third. No.
yeah, well, yeah, for example, or third,
Mhm.
and then like Jackie receives it in his second language and then translates it to himself to his first language. So of course there's a lot of like gaps of that get lost in translation, and that's where the nuances of our own behavior it becomes so important. And so we are very much learning to read each other beyond the verbal communication, um, which is like has become like super key. And when somebody is quiet, we need to interpret what that silence means, or when somebody says something, it doesn't necessarily mean that person doesn't necessarily mean what they say. They can say yes, 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 I can do this, but in reality in reality, like in Mexico, you say, oh yes, 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 yes to everything, and not always that is a yes. um or you say a no, like you can say a no, and also yeah, it can be misinterpreted in many ways. So yeah, and adaptation is also like I think we were talking about it, like adaptation, or the no, not the people, but the organisms that evolved the quickest or the best were not the ones that were the strongest, were the ones that were most able to adapt. So that's also a very live part of our practice, you know, how can we adapt in the best way possible, along with other people and along with our network that we're very happy to engage with. So I know we're finished with the sorry. Um, so these are questions that we're very happy that you guys decided to spend part of your Saturday evening with us, listening to our talk. And we want to sort of ask these questions because we ask these questions to ourselves and open them to you guys. And maybe you have a reflection around them. And maybe we can have a conversation about this and about how you yourselves reflect your practice, your individual desires into your practices with your collectives or with your community. So yeah, so these are sort of like just some prompts that we wanted to discuss with you and open to you guys. Um, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Go back to the
Yeah,
questions.
I'll go back.
Thank you very much, both of you. That was really interesting, and also very interesting end here. See you're flipping it around, so
No, but no stress.
Yeah, you don't
so
have to reply it. I mean, you don't have to like say it, but maybe think about it, write it, and sleep on it, or not.
yeah. Do you wanna? Do you have a response to one of these, or do you wanna ask a question?
Hi, thank you very
Hi,
much for
thank
your
you.
talk. It was really, really inspiring. And something that came to my mind is when you have a team or a group and you have different specialists, how do you deal with, for example, I am also Mexican and I'm also very direct and very like dominant and this is what I want to do. But I also want to kind of keep, uh, at least I notice myself that I struggle to let others who are more um introverted to speak up, but then I also want to speak myself what I want to do. So then in turn, I end up saying nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with having two specialists and being able to like balance that the specialist can explain what they want to do in this kind of dynamic? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are like very much aware of these differences of cultures. Like also me from Taiwan, like interrupting in the conversation or in the group meeting is very like regarded as rude or like not listening or like sometimes it's very like yeah disturbing in a way. So we tend to, or like at least me speaking of myself, like tend to be a little bit quiet and then like want to be observant and then listening to everything and then answer. So there are a lot of like different ways of thinking around this, and the way how we have been reflecting ourselves is to change the structures of meeting, for example. For example, like before we have a round table and then everyone gets to say whatever they want to say. So of course there are some like different proportions of time are used by different people. But then if we sense this, and then of course it also depends on if the one is good. Like the good is like the personal life, the mental health, and if it's not about that necessarily, it could be rearranged. For example, the roundtable meeting can be integrated into something else like stand-up meeting. Like for example, like me having something to say in this meeting, then I have to stand up and then like try to speak up, and then like and everyone else had to like respect their time to that questions or whatever the question has to be discussed. And then if this is not working, then we will move on to the next ways of meeting. So for example, we have a lot of thinkings around this in a way to also to adapt the cultural differences and respect each other.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily like have a meeting about that. Like, how are we going to deal with our cultural differences? I think it just there's a lot of in betweens. You know, there's an in between of like us walking from Tenthaus to here. You know, where you have the chance to engage into like a more personal conversation, and then there's the in betweens. There's a lot of in betweens that can be very used, and that people use it in the group for talking about like, yeah, how's it going, and yeah, all of this, and how do you feel about this, and how do you feel about that. So I think it's like the unofficial parts of it, and it's definitely under construction, and we haven't yet. I don't feel like we have yet succeeded to find the model that works. But definitely, it really comes with time, right? Like with everything, and it comes with this like openness and realness. So there's been a lot of occasions where things have gotten like sort of raw, but not like in the bigger setting, but like in the personal person to person setting. And raw in the sense of like where people are being super real, like I'm having a really bad time, blah blah blah. I'm dealing with blah blah blah, and people can talk with it with different people, and it sort of gets solved and nuanced, like what's it called, like detangled after a while.
Mm. Yeah, it's
Thanks for using our vocabulary.
Yes, yes, yes. Marketing.
shouting out. Yeah, I hope it's answering the questions. Yeah, we're
But we're
stretching.
happy to
Yeah.
talk also like further, like in depth, and also like our offices are in Maridalsveien 3. So yeah, it's you are welcome to come and also converse with us and yeah, exchange.
Does anyone else have any answers or questions?
Hi.
Hi.
So I was just interested in, you kind of speak quite a lot about temporality, like pop-ups and going somewhere and then leaving. And I was just super basic, kind of wanting to understand what are your metrics for measuring maybe long-standing effects of where you visit or the things that you do.
I want almost met you to Mitchu, do you have anything? We have two members there, also in the back, that can say some about that. Yeah, it's a conversation.
The question was, do you have any ways of measuring the long-term effects of those shorter-term pop-up type projects? Very like time-based, short, quick projects. And do you have any way of measuring the longer-term effects of that kind of work?
Hi. I guess it's when, like Jackie was saying, when one project turns into another project and turns into another project, and then I think that is the long measuring. If something, if the curiosity or the question maybe developed or wasn't answered, then it will move forward.
But also, I referred it to Metro because she's been longer in the collective. So Jack and I are quite new, let's say. We came like over a year ago, and Metro has been like part of the collective for a longer time. So she's seen it evolve and grow in very many different ways. And I think like it's true, like when one question is picked up by somebody else and like, okay, but then like if we see that they pick it up, that the population that we work with picks it up and like is like, okay, so now we're gonna do these workshops that you guys are doing. Then we're like, okay, wonderful. Then that means that it this stayed and worked for this population.
Yeah, and also I think it's also interesting to think about this like as an art like collective and its stability or longevity of it, and like we're always seeking at some point some kind of stability in our life as well. So everything is like constantly changing, and also for my interest in like making art, it's also like focusing on this like I don't know, like identity in process because it's never anchored, or it could be anchored at some point, but it would be like floating or like flee away like at another point. So I think like the long term, I don't know, it's also to see like how these at least in my ways of thinking, it's like to be able to mapping out these different points and different dots, and then in the long run, um, if it's possible to all correlate it, or if it's possible to all like I don't know erase or like wrap around, it could be turned into something else, and that's always something that I find it very fascinating or interesting because almost like nothing is like lasting in a way. So, but I'm not saying Tenthaus is not lasting anymore, but I hope, yeah, in these ways of thinking, we also want to, yeah, pinning different anchors. I hope.
Mm, mm, mm.
Mm.
We have a question from an online audience as well. I'll just read it out loud. How do you find your own locality as an immigrant to Oslo and also being exposed to working in an international social context environment?
How do you find your own anchor?
How do you find your own locality as an immigrant to Oslo and also being exposed to working in an international social context/environment?
Good question.
Well, personally, locality. Of course, because as an international, you gravitate around people who are similar to you, you know, so you gravitate around the communities that you know culturally. But then also, I find this is a very personal thing, but I find assimilation somehow interesting and important. So I seek to become a little bit like the receiving organism. So I seek I seek Norwegian contexts where I can try to not be the non-Norwegian in the room as much as possible, even though I know that I am, but like sort of like assimilate as a test, or like speak in the same language, or try to speak in a similar way, or try to become like that, just to see how it feels and how people would react to me in a way. But this is just a very personal way to refer to my locality. So it's like a little bit of both. You stay true to yourself and you stay true to your community, and you engage with people from your community, and then at the same time you go to the receiving community and try to assimilate. But this goes very much into my personal history, because I grew up in a bicultural environment, so I was a little bit of both. So I feel like I can be not necessarily 100% Mexican, or not necessarily 100% whatever. But yeah, how do you do it, Jackie?
Yeah, I think this is also what I was thinking, like locality and then the foreignness. And ever since I was here in the world, I was like having different thinkings around my sexuality and also my identity in the family, whether it's like patriarchal or like balanced one or the other ones. I always find it a little bit like like a little bit struggle to actually enter each of these groups. So in a way, I feel like when I was here in Norway like 3 years ago for the very first time to Europe, I didn't feel very foreign, and also I don't know. I think it's also because of this like unsettledness in my own experiences or history. I find it even more like yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I answered the question, but it's just just like yeah. I think it's unsolvable or like never-ending questions that we all are asking ourselves, and yeah,
Yeah, or each one makes their own little soup,
Yeah.
like their own little recipe of inserting themselves locally. Maybe some locals also don't feel local at all.
yeah,
And then you have to like make your own little soup of whatever I am, because let's say I grew up here and born and raised in Oslo, but I still don't feel like I belong here. So then I find the people that I belong to and then create my little soup so that I can take it to the very Oslo and Norwegian context that I don't feel I belong to. For example, I don't know.
yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Do we have any last question or comment? No? Then we'll take a short break. We'll be back, let's say 5:15. So we take 10 minutes break and then we're ready for the next talk.
Thank you.